On Facebook or just everywhere? Oh, nice. Yes. All right. Okay. Oh, I see some familiar faces. Hi, Carol. It's great. There's Fiona. All right. I'm just sitting here. We're starting a little early. Many of you hopefully have watched the introduction video, and so hi, Betsy. And so you're all caught up to where we're going to start from for this day one of the free Abstracting the Floral workshop. And I'm really excited about this because it means that at least here in the States, it's spring. The flowers are out, the sun's out. I've spent most of my weekend at soccer matches for my daughter, and it's been beautiful. So I'm just going to let everyone file in here. We've got quite a few people, and I'm going to pull you up in the chat. If I look like I'm looking over to the side, it's because you're over on a screen here. Uh, I'm, I always feel like it looks a little shady, but it's not. It's me trying to pay attention to y'all. Okay. Uh, yeah, I think, is our volume good, Dave, for me?
Yeah, you're coming in good.
Okay, great, great. So yeah, if your volume is a little low, it might be your volume. All right, everyone, welcome to the first day of the Abstracting the Floral workshop. This finds us here on Memorial Day weekend, Memorial Day officially in the United States. And I thought, what more appropriate way to spend that than painting flowers, thinking about flowers and, honoring everyone who deserves flowers. So here we are. Uh, when you went through the introduction video, many of you may or may not be familiar with this kind of play, but something that I missed out on when I was getting started as an artist was the freedom just to explore and allow myself the privilege of playing with paint, exploring color, making texture, just using using my intuition to strengthen kind of the love of painting. And I was very much in love with art. I have been ever since I was a little kid. But and it came out, by working in from my head and then throughout throughout the time that I was doing art, it morphed into me trying to get it right. My loved ones, my family, my friends would say, "Oh, that looks just like something," and then I was like, "Well, it does it." And that was and so I started responding to that, maybe subconsciously, and getting it more right. And in the process, I got pretty good at capturing a likeness of things. But I also lost some of the fun and some of the play that was possible in the art world. And that's where I think a lot of our discoveries come from, is that innovation that comes from accidents and exploration. So in the introduction video, you saw me creating a very loose version of a playground, which is what I call it. And that's where it's just about moving colors around, using textures, and those playgrounds can get very deep if you want them to. You can, apply collage if you're using acrylics. You can do transfers. There's a million ways of just losing yourself in that process. But eventually, I want to come out of that process and back toward something tangible and beautiful. And so that's where we are now. So I'm just going to walk us through. I'll share my screen really quick. Um,
And we just hit 11 o'clock, so people
oh yeah,
are still
so
coming in here.
yeah, I guess I did start a little early. Welcome. My name is Gabriel Lipper. Welcome to Abstracting the Floral, day one of this workshop. Thank you for being here. Thanks for signing up. I'm excited about this. I hope you are too. We're just going to be going through some of the exercises and processes that help free us up and take us deeper into this experience of painting. Um, I love flowers, absolutely, but this process that we're going to be talking about really can take us in any direction, and it really allows you to be able to paint whatever you choose. This specific version of the workshop is flowers because it's spring, and also there's something about a flower that is so non-judgmental that I just can't get over it. When you paint a flower, it it almost inherently looks good because there's no one saying, the nose isn't right, or a mountain doesn't look like that. A flower is so wildly organic. It just fills us with the possibility to create and explore, and it almost feels like any organic shape can become a flower. So you've got a lot of room there that maybe some paintings don't allow for. But I think for a lot of us, the nature is that's how we feel about a flower. When we inhale the beauty of a flower, we smell it. It's electric. They're exciting. If you've ever spent time just looking at a bouquet up close, they're infinite. But when we go to paint them, we try to make them finite. At first, it might be this loose approximation of a flower, but then the little brush comes out, and there's this carefulness that can take place, and then immediately after that, because of the infinite of a floral bouquet, there's overwhelm. So what I'd like to do is simplify and break down this process into something that implies mastery, but it doesn't have to come with immediate mastery. And that's what abstracting the flower is all about. So let's get started. I'm going to share my screen really quick here. I'll just do there's a little visual beginning. And there we are. Okay. So, it starts with an idea. In this case, you can see the bouquet in the back. It was a beautiful light bouquet, and I wanted to get that going. And you can see here, the bouquet is still there, and there's a complete painting. There's an urgency in that. When you create a painting at that rate, how can you fill in all those spaces and create something tangible and beautiful that ends up feeling not only spontaneous but finished? That's what I want to walk you through today, is this possibility of creating something that can end up on a wall and even find its way, to a pair of collectors. In this case, some good friends of mine who found that, and now it's in their kitchen. What I want to do with you now is just begin with something that I think many of you are familiar with. Um, and that's the idea of a contour drawing. Because when we go to paint something, anything, the tendency is to put a label on it. It's to name it, and and uh, and that's, I think, the first misstep. That's where we go wrong. Because the minute you say this is that, your idea of it's a preconceived notion about how it should look. So if we don't put a name on it and we just look at it for its shapes, for its negative and positive spaces, we actually have a much better chance of getting it, at its getting kind of the spirit of it. So I'm going to jump over here, and on the website below this video, there is a link to a reference of this flower we're going to be working from. And if you want to join with me, not everybody's going to have a sketchbook in their hand or whatever, but if you have a sketchbook handy, you can join with me. Some of you are familiar with a contour drawing. This is going to be a blind contour drawing, and I'm going to be blind as well. So, so what we're doing, what we're going to do is you pull up your reference, and for those of you who have done this before, fine. Let's do it again. I find like it's it's not done enough. I think it's a practice that each of us as artists could do every week, and we'd be better off for it. So let me switch cameras, and I'll shift over there. There we go. Okay, there I am, popping over there with my chair. Boop, boop, boop. Okay, this over. Is that pin, Dave?
Yes, it is.
Okay. All right. So if you have the reference in front of you, one of the things that I like to do is I like to find kind of an edge. Um, so this is the top of the paper, for example, and you'll find the top of your sketchbook or whatever. And that's a good place to start. So start at if you look at the reference, there's that one bit of kind of floral buds shooting up at the top. And that we know that that's the top, so that's a great place to start. But now what I'm doing, listen, I'm not looking at the drawing, and I promise I won't. And it's going to start looking pretty wonky. I'm just going outside of the outer contour. I'm not looking at flowers. I'm just looking at the shapes. And what I'm trying to keep in mind as I do this is the relative scale of things in relationship. Now, I'm not looking at them, so it's going to look a little funny. But for example, if there's a longer shape, it's going to feel longer under my hand. And then a shorter shape is going to feel shorter. And I'm just allowing the pencil to travel. And you're probably going to be underwhelmed by the result of this. Uh, my blind contours won't most likely be any better than yours. We are just allowing ourselves to feel the negative spaces of these flowers. But what that does is it takes any of the judgment out of what we're doing. And right now, all I'm doing is I'm looking at the flower. I'm not looking at the page. So there may be overlap. I don't know what I'm getting into. If I see these little details, I can fixate on them, or I can generalize them. But it's almost as if my fingers are going over the very edges of this bouquet. See if you can guess where I'm at along this contour. Again, I'm not getting into any of the details, and I'm allowing my pencil to stay on the paper the whole time. I never lift it. And we're not looking at the paper, like I said. It's a very meditative exercise because it slows our mind down. We get outside of and away from judgment about what we're doing, and we allow our hand and our mind to coexist without knowing, without putting a name on it. Now, one thing that I may have an advantage with here, because I feel like that was the vase, in case you can't tell. I feel like my vase may be somewhat symmetrical, although I don't know, I'm not looking. But it would be because I know that my hand went down a certain distance and then up a certain distance. And that comes from practice. It comes from um, knowing the feeling of things. But it also might end up being very asymmetrical and very wonky. And that's kind of the fun of this exercise. There's no getting this wrong, but there is laughing at the end of it if you choose to. There is the joy of the little simple shapes. And then we're going to talk about why this is so important at the end of it. So many of you have done this blind contour exercise. There's a why in it. And some artists may understand that why, but a lot of us, I know I didn't understand it when I was actually introduced to this idea all the way back in high school. And at the time, no one explained where it could lead or the power of this exercise to me, or at least not in a way that I was able to digest at the time. And now that I've been doing this for a while, it feels almost like magic. Dave, any comments in there? Is anyone following along? Can you tell? I'm not looking at the screen either, so I don't know.
Yes, they're following along. No questions at the moment.
All right, we've got a few got a
But
few blind
I'm
contours.
sending people the download link for the reference photo.
Wonderful, wonderful. All right. So I'm coming around now. I've got this little bulb, and I've got a little tiny stem, which may or may not overlap. And then I've got this last big petal. And now I'm going to be going up the other side of the thing that I started with. And it may or may not, the odds are that it won't connect. All right, so that's the end of where, oh yeah. Woo! Okay, that's pretty exciting, people. So let's talk about this. This in reference to in reference to the reference. Let me okay. So here's my vase, and I was right. I could feel that the vase was feeling, somewhat symmetrical. The shapes of the blind contour are kind of intact, but you can see I started here, and as I was coming around, or I started here, didn't I? As I was coming around, I went past that point and went up. This line here would be this other side. What's great about this, though, is that these shapes are pretty accurate. They are what was in front of me. They've just morphed a bit. But if you look at this negative shape here, and you compare it to that floral reference, trying to draw this is actually probably harder than it is to just allow yourself to copy the shapes. And this is at the heart of what really great masterful drawing is about. When we connect this idea of following the shapes without bias, without trying to work through them, I'm going to switch cameras now. Oops. With the ability to compare those shapes and create something that is symmetrical in places and does uh, come together, it gives you the kind of freedom and ability that's I think missing for a lot of people. A lot of people who are trying to do somewhat realistic work might use tracing or graphing, but there's something inside of us that's already there that can allow us to do those things on our own without using those kind of tools. It's internal. It's an internal graph, an internal shape maker. So now I want to take this playground that we've done in the introduction video and expand on it a little bit. And I'm going to share my screen again. Okay. All right. So we'll start by putting out the split primary palette that I described in the introduction video. And this is all of the primary colors, and I am adding a warm and cool version so that you can have the largest range of color possible. Everything's created by the primary colors, and when I talk about color, I like to keep it more simplified. I'm not the kind of artist that names every color and has specific. I mean, I will, of course, I know them all, but I think it's easy to get caught up in the minutia of a thing and lose track of what you're actually trying to accomplish. So as I put the colors out, I'm going with warm and cool, and then I'm just going to move forward, mixing a kind of a black with my acrylics. And what I'm doing here with this large brush, you'll notice it's a pretty big brush, is I'm actually repeating the very exercise that we just tackled. and I'm using the brush to do that. I'm I'm dabbing. I'm taking some of the brushwork off of the canvas. It's not just a blind contour, but it's basically the same principle. And this is a principle that I think a lot of people are missing in their work. It's instead of being careful and drawing every little bud and leaf, I'm looking for those big negative shapes. Uh, and that's what's going to make this important. That's what's going to make it cohesive. Dave, I'm not able to pull the. Oh, yes, I am. Yes, I am. Okay, here we go. Yep, got it. Yep. So yeah, and Astrid saying it's good to go in with a big brush and keep it loose, and that's exactly it. If we get a small brush out right as we start, the first thing that we end up doing is getting caught in those details. But I don't want to get caught in the details. I want to allow the spontaneity of this playground to come through, and at the same time, find some shape, some solidity. So when I approach a painting like this, my goal initially is just to start blocking in the big ideas and allowing the color itself to do the work. And and I think that's that's something that a lot of artists are maybe missing. Now, in order to get this floral bouquet to read as a floral bouquet, there's a couple of steps involved. One is the spontaneity that you saw in the introduction video, and now the next one is kind of finding my way through this process and really observing the bouquet, not naming or identifying anything specifically, just looking for those shapes. And the shapes that I'm focused on right now with this big brush and a lot of dark color is the negative space, the space around those shapes. Rather than getting caught up in all of the details, I'm going to let the playground itself be those details.
Gabriel, can you just list off the colors that you're using in this?
Sure. I'm not going to be too specific in this warm-up video because it's it's really what you might have on hand. But there are three primary colors. Obviously, there's red, yellow, and blue, and you will have a warm version of red, or excuse me, I'll start with the top, the cool version of red and a warm version of red. So you can have a lot of range in your reds. In this case, I introduced a yellow ochre, which is kind of a cool yellow. And then I've got both warm and cool yellow, two blues, a warmer and cool blue. That's kind of an oxymoron because blue is inherently cool, but there are two versions of blue there. And finally, I think I have maybe a deep green and a black. Um, and with acrylic paint, I don't always use black when I'm using oil. But and yes, absolutely, you can use gouache to do this. You can use oil paints to do this. If you're using oil paints, you're going to need to use let that playground dry for some time. That's the only downside of oils in this case is that it takes more time. But but the reason I use black sometimes with acrylic is because they tend to dry a little bit transparent. And so laying down a nice dark surface first, if you want to add dark colors, really helps the richness of those dark colors. But when I was painting in oil exclusively, I would rarely use black. I would mix my blacks using dark greens and purples and quinacridone reds, things like that. Now you can see I'm being kind of careful with this drawing right now, but what I'm also doing is I'm continuing to use a big brush. Cindy, you're asking what paper I'm using. The paper I was doing that blind contour on was a kind of a version of Yupo, Y-U-P-O, I believe is how it's spelled, and it's a very slick, fun kind of plasticky paper that takes a line really well. But this panel that I'm working on right now is actually a wooden panel, gessoed. And yes, the demo's in acrylic. So most of the time I do demos in acrylic because it dries so fast and it allows us as artists to experiment and play with so much more. That's what's important. Yeah, and feel free to ask questions in the chat, please. That's what, obviously what we're here for in this Q&A. You can see that I'm sculpting this floral out, and without really a lot of extra effort, it's starting to come together in a really surprising and dynamic way, and I haven't even added any detail. So for all of you who love the details and get caught in the weeds of those details, there's something else happening here, something exciting and rich. And when we see it on a wall in a gallery, it jumps out at us because the eye doesn't know how we achieved it or how we got there. Now I'm going to switch to some actual color and some opacity, and I'm looking at that reference, and I'm making some detailed decisions based on where things are in the drawing, uh, which when I say drawing, I mean that big painted shape. And I'm adding something tangible and recognizable. And this is really where the magic happens. When we merge the abstraction and the spontaneity of the playground with something identifiable, this is where the art takes off, because it's one thing to have a lot of shapes and have a lot of fun, and that can be really rewarding in and of itself, but does it come together for you? Um, yeah, so the question is, am I going to leave the background coming through uh, in the flowers? And and yes, I want to leave parts of that background. That's the art of this, is allowing some of that to come through and getting rid of some of it all also. Um, let's see. Are you following the drawing you were using, or is this the reference photo? And what's the point of the drawing if you're using the reference photo? Okay, so in this case, this reference photo that you all have, we're all going to work on this together. So I've included the reference photo for us all. I'm working from a live bouquet, or I was working from a live bouquet in this example. But the point of the drawing is to really understand positive and negative space. If you're working from a reference photo, you could, I guess, trace it or use a graph and be very specific, but you're not going to get the spontaneity, and you're not going to be able to reproduce it in a way like you would with a large brush, for example. Um, that's what that blind contour is for. And the reason I chose to crop this image with the vase dropping off is because I didn't want to make this composition dualistic. I wanted to have um, a large focal point, which is obviously this exploding bouquet. And then I wanted to allude to the fact that it's part of a bouquet in a vase, but I didn't feel like I needed to have this symmetrical vase that's yellow and grabs our attention to compete with the wildness of the flowers. So in this case, I thought I'd try kind of a more contemporary version of cropping and just crop it right off before it started its way around. Now, if I had cropped a little lower on that vase and the circle had begun to close, it would have directed us off the bottom of the composition, and I don't think it would have felt as strong. So I chose to crop it a little higher, so that the energy of this composition is moving toward the flowers. All right. Okay. So we've gotten a long way here pretty quickly. Um, and I don't want to take a ton of Memorial Day time, but let me tell you a little bit about how this workshop is going to function. I'm giving you obviously examples, and hopefully instilling a little bit of excitement in your process. The way this workshop works, and what's going to really help leap your work forward, is that you take the rest of this time to practice some of these ideas on your own. And we can learn so much. I mean, I know there's a lot of workshops out there, and people love to take workshops. And there's kind of a rush that happens when we take a workshop. We get a little endorphin, but without the application of some of these ideas, um, the learning never really lands. So my encouragement and your homework for today is to try some of these principles in your studio, in your kitchen, wherever you paint. Um, maybe you have a bedroom reserved for it. I don't know. That I used to do that. I used to choose the biggest room in my house and make that my studio until I was fortunate enough to get a space to work out of. But get your paints out. Play with some of these ideas. Move some paint around on your playgrounds. Allow them to dry. Maybe do three. Work on several at a time. And then the best part of this exercise, because it's an assignment, you kind of have to do it, is get yourself some flowers. Whether that means you're going to the grocery store and picking them out and allowing yourself a bouquet, or maybe you order them from your favorite florist, or maybe you go out into your garden and create a bouquet yourself. Take some time, get yourself a bouquet of flowers. They are wonderful and they never let you down. They're beautiful and mesmerizing, and you deserve them. So get yourself a bouquet of flowers and do this live. The flowers move, they shift. So it doesn't give you a lot of time. If you take a photograph of it, that's fine. That'll work for the exercise too. But if you're working from a photograph, when you could be working from a live bouquet of flowers, you're missing one of the most important parts of this whole process. And that's to tap into the energy that the flowers exude, and they do. So when you're in front of flowers, when you can smell them and see them and get up close to them, there's a much better and more powerful relationship at hand. So grab yourself some flowers. I'm not asking you to get back onto Google and search flower. I know that there's a flower somewhere, even if it ends up being a single flower in a vase. Then practice this idea of contour design and playground and merging them. And when we come back on Wednesday, I'm going to field even more of your questions, and we're going to go a little deeper into this process. You saw just the beginning of how we might approach this. But what I encourage you to do is do these exercises, whether they be the contour drawings or the playgrounds or both. If you're combining them, wherever you end up by Wednesday, please post these in the 8 Paint Infinite Arts Facebook group and share your process, share what you've discovered about your work. For a lot of you who are realistic painters, like I started out as a realist, I was a realist painter, quite realist, photorealist. Take your little brushes and put them aside. Get the big brushes out and really allow yourself to explore this. And if you're an abstract painter, spend a little bit more time with the drawing. Allow yourself to get something that looks and feels like the buds and shapes in front of you. And in order to do that, focus on the negative shapes that you're working with, the shapes between the flowers, the curves, the angles. One thing that you can do when you're looking at that is compare the larger shapes to the smaller ones. How much larger is the larger part of a bouquet than the smaller as you create those shapes? And you'll get a pretty realistic looking shape with all this playground coming through. Anyway, that's the process. That's what we're going to be beginning to work with this week. And I think you're going to be blown away by the results that you get in a pretty short amount of time. And there's, of course, a lot more that I can go into with that. But that's the exercise for today. So enjoy your Memorial Day. Have a wonderful time exploring these paints. Grab some flowers, and we'll see you on Wednesday with a new introduction and a continuation of this Q&A. Thanks so much. Head to the studio. I would say right now, you cut out a little bit of time for this workshop. This is the time to execute. And we'll see you on Wednesday. Thanks so much. Oh, wait, no, thanks so much. Let me check in with, I just want to make sure. Okay, yes.